G'day and welcome to Beyond Sobriety, a podcast where you'll hear real stories of recovery and resilience come to life. I'm Michael and I'm an alcoholic, your host and fellow journeyer on the road to sobriety. As someone who has walked the path of addiction and found solace in the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, I understand the challenges and triumphs that come with striving for sobriety. And it's with this understanding and empathy that we've created this podcast. Our purpose here at Beyond Sobriety is simple yet profound: to provide a platform where individuals can share their experience with alcoholism openly and authentically. Through candid conversation, personal narrative, and expert insights, we aim to inspire hope, foster understanding, and offer a beacon of light to those still navigating the shadows of addiction. We'd love for you to be a part of this growing community. If you find value in the stories that you hear today, please consider liking and leaving a comment and sharing this episode with somebody who might benefit from hearing it. Your support will help spread the message of hope and resilience to more people who need it. I'm Michael and I'm an alcoholic, and this is Beyond Sobriety. Hi, we're here with Racheal. Racheal, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks. Hi, I'm Racheal. I am an alcoholic. I'm 55 years old. My sobriety date is the 15th of January 2014. At the moment, I'm on a journey working with people in a community-based type of role.
Thanks, Racheal. Can you describe the attitude towards alcohol in your family as a child when you were growing up?
Childhood was a very interesting childhood. I did grow up with a father who was a Vietnam veteran, and he had problems with alcohol.
Yes.
So our whole life we lived in a family unit that drinking was the culture every day, and also it was quite a dysfunctional household. So I do remember my father, my first memory of alcohol was I was probably about 3 years old, and he would give myself and my brothers beer if we had worms. That's what he actually treated worms with. So we never actually knew what a worming tablet was.
I didn't realise that was an effective treatment for worms.
I don't believe that it is.
Okay.
However, my father believed that was actually the case. My experience with alcohol, that was my very first memory of it.
Yes.
And it was something that, my parents had friends over. They had a lot of parties. There was a lot of noise. There was, a lot of drinking.
Yeah. I imagine that would be quite difficult, especially with the trauma associated with being a war veteran for your father. Did you see much of that growing up? Like, I guess, to comment on his journey without stealing his story?
My father was very affected from Vietnam. He was extremely affected. I myself, there was a lot of physical abuse towards my older brother. I didn't experience the physical abuse, but I experienced a lot of the emotional and mental abuse that went with it. My father was so unpredictable. He was such a difficult man to know. He was really hard I just remember growing up, it's like we were ostracised from both my mum's side of the family and my dad's side, like because of his drinking, because he was so unpredictable. We didn't get asked to a lot of family gatherings, and I think the abuse as well, a lot of the family members were unhappy with the abuse, so it was easier to not deal with it rather than to deal with it.
Yeah.
So I don't really remember correlating that it was the war that had done that to my father. I just thought he was nuts, actually. I just thought he was a bit crazy.
Yeah, well, you're not wrong in thinking that as well, but, it's sad because it's also, without knowing it, just to be completely general, it's not always their fault as well. Being a veteran we're asked to do things. And the only reason I'm talking about it is because we had somebody earlier on the show a number of weeks ago who was a Vietnam veteran as well. And his attitude towards it was amazing. What he said was, we were told by our Prime Minister, life isn't meant to be easy. There are hard things to do, and this is your lot. He goes, we were sent over there. He goes, and when we came back, we were abused. We were spat on. We were called all these different names. And on top of the trauma for this gentleman, I'm not surprised that he turned to something, some kind of substance as well. And there's a whole generation of men out there that were affected. We can only see the flow-on effect from that as well.
Definitely. I think what it's shown me over the years, I have now such an understanding. Like, I have so much compassion for my father. He actually passed away from this disease in 2012.
Yes.
He shared that he drowned in Hawaii and he was about 8 times over the limit.
Oh, no.
He was bodyboarding at 64. Again, I guess that's the madness of this disease.
Yeah.
That he thought that he could bodyboard. Yeah, he ended up drowning. And I think even with that, that on his death certificate, it says that it's saltwater aspiration. But in fact, there was nothing mentioned about it was the alcohol that actually caused,
Yes.
him to do that. So I've really had a journey around that with my father. And I do today have a lot of compassion for him. I can't imagine. There were some documents that I found when he did pass away around his psychologist appointments and his post-traumatic stress. He never spoke to me about those things. I never knew about. He kept that so hidden, and he literally drank it away. That's how he
That's
coped.
how he dealt with it.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And I spent a bit of time on that because I could see the correlations between what I experience and what I see in the rooms to what you just described, the isolation, the madness, the anger, the impulsive nature that just takes hold of us when we drink. You would have seen that growing up. At what time did you first reach for a drink to solve the problem?
I was 13 when I picked up my first drink. So I remember with friends growing up, I never ever wanted friends to come to my house. I never wanted them because my father was so unpredictable. I couldn't pick what was going to happen, whether he was going to be in a good mood or a bad mood. I met a group of friends when I was in year 7. So I always felt like that we talk about that, the square peg in a round hole.
Yes.
I never quite, my mother cut our hair because there wasn't a lot of income coming into the house. My mother cut our hair. We had funny haircuts. We didn't have, the clothing that was in fashion.
Yeah.
We were odd, like we were a bit odd,
Yeah.
We had family secrets. That was the other thing as well.
Okay.
We had family secrets that we didn't want people to know about, what was really going on behind closed doors. So I think when I found this group of people in year 7 that, they were drinking and smoking, and for the first time I sort of felt part of. And I was like, oh, wow, I actually feel part of this. They wanted to hang out with me and they, wanted to do these things. And my first drink I remember very clearly. I went with a friend and we had a bag of wine, a cask of wine.
A bag. It's going to be good
sorry,
when it starts with a bag of wine.
A cask of wine.
No, that's outstanding. I love that. You got good quality stuff when it comes in a bag.
In a bag.
Not a bottle.
Yeah, definitely. And so we took that cask. I didn't know at the time it was called a cask. I can't even remember how we actually got hold of that alcohol neither, to be honest. And
there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah, we were living on the North Shore in Mossman, quite posh over there.
Yes.
And we went to a park and we commenced to drink. And I remember having the first sip of it and I was like, oh my, yuck, that's awful. And then I just continued to drink it. And then the next thing I woke up and I was in hospital. So I had no recollection.
Wow.
So my first drink was a blackout.
So it was a blackout.
I now know, yeah. So I was found by some bushwalkers. My friend had taken off and left me, and I was found by some bushwalkers in this park. And
so it happened almost immediately.
Yeah.
It was like a first couple of drinks and then bang.
Yep.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So there was no I got drunk a bit more, and then it was.
Not for me.
Okay.
So, and I just remember thinking, my parents were so frightened, and I just remember thinking, wow, when can I do that again?
So it was 13 years old.
Yeah.
So you started quite young.
I did. And that started for me something. It was like it had unlocked something for me.
Yes.
And I was, hanging out with the cool kids, or who I thought was cool anyway. So schooling went out the window. There wasn't much schooling.
Yes.
Wasn't much education. There was a lot of drinking, a lot of drugging, smoking from the age of 13. And I think my parents' solution to that was I was not the problem. It was other people, not me. And so we moved.
The bad influence.
Yeah. They actually moved us from this beautiful place in Mossman to Minto. So,
Oh, my Lord.
So
you must have been with a really bad crowd if that was, gosh.
So that was their solution. But I think back today and I go, I was the problem.
Yeah.
They had me at psychologists and so many trying to get me help, and I didn't know what was wrong with me. I couldn't tell them what was wrong with me.
So this is your teenage years. You saw psychologists and stuff.
Yeah.
So were you hooked from that first one?
Definitely.
Okay. How did you finish your schooling? What happened with that?
Look, I fumbled my way through school. So I ended up with a school certificate. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if I jump forward now, I have the most incredible jobs that I just should not have. I should not have these jobs.
I find most alcoholics are very high achievers once they become sober.
Yeah.
We don't muck around with it.
No, not at all. Not at all. So, yeah, I'm so grateful, but at times I'm like, I don't actually know how that happened. In spite of me, I ended up with this amazing job. So, but yeah.
Let's move forward a little bit and go early 20s. So we've got an idea of the teenage years. How was your early 20s? And I can see you smiling. So you're obviously thinking about something.
Thinking about my stories. Those teenage years for me were rough. I made the decision to leave home when I was about 15.
Okay.
I met somebody who I thought at the time I loved dearly. He was my perfect person. Little did I know he was quite abusive. I then entered into an extremely abusive relationship. I had my first child when I just turned 19.
Oh, wow.
I had my daughter. Then I had a son a couple of years later to the same person. And my son was born with a genetic disorder.
Okay.
And he passed away when he was 2.
Oh, no.
So if I think back to that period, that was the one period in my life when I was pregnant with my daughter, I didn't touch alcohol.
Yes.
I didn't touch any alcohol, and I didn't touch alcohol probably for 4 years. There was a period of 4 years where I didn't drink, but I believe I was white knuckling it. Like I suffered extreme postnatal depression with my daughter. And I think just given that my ability to disconnect and to push other people away. So I did a lot of that by myself with her. I felt quite alone in that with her, and being in the abusive relationship as well.
I understand.
When my son passed away, just before he passed away, I actually made the decision to leave that person, which was really, really tough. There came a lot of post-traumatic stress along with that.
Yeah, I understand.
I got into another relationship, which is what we do, right? We
just jump around.
That wasn't a bad decision. I met my husband. We were together for a very long time. He was
That's really good.
He was 18 and I was 22.
Okay.
And we met each other at the club, and 2 days later he moved in with me. Again, as we do, we move quickly.
Half measures avail as nothing.
Yeah, we had 2 children together as well. So.
And this is the person you're currently with?
No. We actually we got divorced when I was about 14 months sober.
Okay, so you met this current partner, your second one, while you said you're white knuckling it. Is that correct?
I was, and he was 18 and I was 22. He liked his alcohol as well. He liked his alcohol, and I think we had a group of quite young friends, and that's when I picked up drinking again.
The way I kind of like to describe it is that you might not be drunk, but you're definitely not sober.
Yeah.
As other people use the term dry drunk or whatever it might be. But without the program of AA, I'm just sober, but I'm still just as crazy. Yeah. You act out in so many other ways. And you're not drunk, but you're definitely not sober.
You're not sober. And I really felt that.
Yes.
I really, really felt that I was quite manic. Actually, I was quite manic. And if I want to talk about rock bottoms over that period of time, over my drinking, I had a very, 35-year history of drinking.
Yeah.
I gave it a good go. While I was pregnant with my son, my 30-year-old son, I drank that whole pregnancy.
Yeah.
I talk about that because that was probably one of the most shameful things I have ever done. And I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop drinking.
How old were you then?
I was 24 when I had my son.
24. So that's well into your drinking career. If you started off at 13 doing blackouts, so definitely it quite matter-of-factly had a hold over your life.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I couldn't. It's like we talk about that first drink goes down. I'm just sitting here thinking about, I've got the feeling down in your throat.
I know it well.
Yep, in your throat. And it's like everything's off the table then. As soon as that, I never understood, they talk about in AA, it's the first drink that does the damage. And for me, I'm like, don't be ridiculous. It's after the first bottle. Like that's when I'm really out of it. And that's when I'm, and then I go on to the second bottle and I'm really damaged. But I really understand now it's that sets off that physical
that craving.
And it's a mental obsession as well because I then can't stop.
Yeah.
I can't stop. And as much as my willpower, I didn't want to drink when I was pregnant. I'll just share a story. I was out at a male review. It was Manpower. I don't know if you ever heard of Manpower. And
so not the recruitment company.
No, not at all. The strippers. And I was heavily pregnant. Heavily pregnant, and I'm drinking, and they asked for, who would like a photo? Who would like a photo? Come and sit on our knee. And I remember one particular person, and I wanted to sit on his knee, and he looked at me and he was like, no, thank you. I'm this heavily pregnant woman, drunk, clearly drunk. And I just remember saying, who does this person think he is? How dare he?
Yeah.
And it's not until later on I looked at myself and I'm like, imagine I can't imagine, what that looked like.
How do you feel thinking about that now, looking back at yourself?
Oh, it's appalling behaviour. It's certainly not in a way that I would ever act today.
Yeah.
Like I would never dream. And for me, it shows me how insidious this disease is, because when I put alcohol into my system, I want to say I can guarantee that I'm going to misbehave, but I actually can't guarantee where it's going to take me. Like I don't know. And because I was a blackout drinker, I have no idea. I don't have any idea what's going to go on.
Yeah. How I felt about it is that drinking made me do things that was against my values. And one of my values, and I'm sure one of yours would be, is that like one of my values might be I won't smoke, or I won't, do this. I won't beat my wife. I won't do whatever. But what happened was that once you started drinking, there was nothing off the table. There was no leashes. There was no barriers. There was no walls. There was nothing that could stop you. And the only thing that was important was getting that next drink. And
drinking it out, that was the other thing, was actually, it was like this need, like it was not even a need. I'm just trying to think about how I felt. Maybe at times I didn't feel at all. Maybe I just went with it.
Yeah. And
let it take me over.
When you're in that position, and it's just everything is about that next drink. So you're describing your early mid-20s. How were you functioning? Were you working? Were you, I won't say just because that's not fair. Were you at home with the children? What were you doing?
I was at home with the children. I think back now how, as a parent, I was a parent that was very dutiful. That's how I describe myself. I was dutiful. So my children at that stage were clothed and they were fed and they had a roof over their head. And I certainly wasn't, don't believe I was violent towards them. However, the emotional nurturing was just not there. It was not there. I couldn't play with my children. I didn't know how to play with them, actually. I didn't, even the anger manifested itself in my drinking. Like I was always tight and angry. So it was always like the kids walking on eggshells. So
I'm nodding along because I was exactly the same. Can you see the I mean, I've only been sitting down with you for a few minutes now chatting. Can you see the parallels between how you were acting and how your father was acting?
Oh, completely. And the interesting thing is the end of my drinking,
Yes.
I actually thought to myself, I'm never going to be like my father. That's what I thought. I'm never going. And interesting again, because I loved my father dearly. I actually loved my father a lot. But I said, I'm never going to be like my father. And I woke up one day and I said, you're exactly like him. And I can't do a thing about it. Like I couldn't do a thing about it. I said, you are.
Because when you were talking back saying, you know, my children were this and that they'll clothe, they'll fed, they'll this, it sounded like to me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it sounded like you're almost comparing yourself to your parents and your experience.
There was a lot of, with my children, they had great Christmas presents. It was all the outside, wasn't it? It's if it looked good on the outside. I always felt quite that I never had enough. You know, I never had enough with my parents. They didn't have enough to give me. So financially, my children had enough.
Yes.
However, I didn't realize at the time that it was not ever about that. I just couldn't give them something I didn't have. I didn't have it. I couldn't identify emotions. I didn't know what emotions were.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to hug my children. I didn't know. It was the nurturing. I didn't know how to actually nurture them.
It's funny. We can function to a degree within our work. We can put on a mask. We can get the KPIs and we can hit the targets and we can do the sales, whatever it is. And we can fudge it along even through, you know, the low points of our drinking. But the family, you can't fake that. No. And they know, because it's a heart thing. I can go to work and just go, I don't care, I'm here to do my job, do an effective job and go home and be quite high performing. But that's not how a family works. No. Because you could do the exact opposite at home and go, look, you know, the dishes are a mess, the house is a mess. You know, I haven't been able to wash my daughter's hair in 2 weeks because I've just been frazzled. But they don't know that. They don't realize that. They know the hugs, the love and the care that they feel. And so alcohol robs us of that part.
If I look today at my relationship with my children, and they're all adults now, mm-hmm. You know, they range from 36 down to 30. Actually, my youngest daughter is turning 30 next month. I have a really, really lovely relationship with my children, and it baffles me. And this for me has only been due to sobriety.
Yes.
You know, the difference for me today is I have always loved my children. I always loved them.
Absolutely.
They talk about our emotional growth is so stunted the day that we pick up a drink.
Yes.
So I go, oh, I was 13, like I'm 11 years sober. So what does that make me now? I'm in my 20s, you know?
Because everything just stopped. Yeah, I get it.
I feel like that. And today, you know, with my children, my partner only said it to me the other night, actually, we were sitting outside, and he said, Racheal, I can only hope with his children that he can have the relationship that I have with my children. We're so open, transparent. Mm. There's nothing off the table that they can't bring to me and talk to me about. Today I hug them. I tell them I love them. Mm. Every time I'm on the phone, I tell them, you know, what a gift. What a gift.
Absolute blessing.
Yeah.
It's amazing. There's obviously still a significant period of time in your story while you're still drinking, because if I do my maths correctly, it was your early 40s that you got sober. Mm-hmm. And I guess we're kind of only up to your mid-20s. Your children are young. I guess that's still a long period of time. How and what made you realise that you had to do something about this?
I gained some employment in my 30s, when I turned 30, and which, you know, put me on this pathway that I never thought I would be on. I was managing large teams of people, and the financial stuff I was always unmanageable.
Yes.
Around financials, never, and purely because I needed to drink and I needed to smoke.
Yeah.
So the financial side of it was, so I think those years for me were every afternoon I would come home from work and I would just rip my work clothes off because it was like it was this filth for me, get rid of them.
Yep.
And I'd put my best drinking attire on, which was my dressing gown.
Classy. I see you haven't come far from the bag that you're drinking out of at the start.
And I would just pour that glass of wine and I would just want to forget. I just wanted to forget the day, forget the day. So that is there's so much more in between of what, they say alcoholism, it's a slow burn, right?
Yes.
Like it's a slow burn. We can put ourselves through so much pain, degradation, like before we get to that rock bottom.
Yes.
I had a husband and I had a home.
Yes.
And we had 2 cars in the driveway and we had a swimming pool. But underneath, it was nobody actually knew what was going on underneath. Like I felt like I was dying. Like I really felt like my health had deteriorated. I was quite thin because eating interfered with my drinking.
Yes.
Because it would give me a full stomach. So I remember I would get outside. I would work out. This is my craziness. I would work out how many calories were in a bottle of wine.
Love it. Yeah.
So I'd work out how many calories were in it.
Yes.
So I would then work out how long I had to walk for on the treadmill to burn those calories in the morning.
Yes.
So then in the afternoon, I'd say, oh, yay, well, I've done that. I could have 2 bottles of wine tonight.
Love the maths. See, what I used to do is after work, I'll take my kids to the park and I would get fortified wine and I'll pour it into a Gatorade bottle. And you know how the parks have those little exercise equipments? I would work out on them and I would drink my Gatorade and walk around until the point that I was working out so much, and it sounds like I was working out a lot. I wasn't. And I'd vomit. And then my kid, were you sick? I'm like, no, I'm fine. I'll just walk and be like, yep, too much. And then keep on going. But I love the maths. Hi, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed the show so far. This podcast is all about sharing real stories of resilience, recovery, and hope. Stories that remind us that we're not alone in this journey. If you'd like to support this work and help us reach more people, there are a few simple ways you can make a difference. Take a moment to like this episode, leave a comment, or share it with someone who you think might benefit from hearing it, whether it's a friend, family member, or somebody in your recovery community. Your support could touch the lives and inspire someone in their road to sobriety. Your stories are important. They remind us that we are not alone and help us all stay sober. What we're doing here creates a space where people can share their experiences, feel understood, and find inspiration to keep moving forward. By supporting the show, you're helping to amplify those voices and ensure that more people who need to find this message can. If you'd like to share your story and be interviewed, please email me at beyondsobrietyaa@gmail.com. Every journey is unique, and your experience could be exactly what someone needs to hear to find hope, strength, or inspiration. This podcast thrives on real stories from real people, and your voice has the power to make a difference in somebody's life. Don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to connect and discuss how your story can be a part of Beyond Sobriety. Thank you for your support. Together we can continue to make a difference. Now, let's get back to the episode.
It was just trying to find ways, or I would write on the calendar, I would write down how many bottles of wine. Our calendar was in the pantry, so every time you open the pantry, you could see the calendar. So this is in the later part of my drinking.
Yep.
I would actually write every day, like 1 bottle. The next day I'd write, 3 glasses. The next day it would be 3 bottles. The next day. But I would say to the kid, come and have a look at the calendar. Look how well I'm doing. Like my family didn't care. They would have been thinking, just stop. Just stop. I think it was the behaviour for me towards the end of my drinking. It was the behaviour that was becoming erratic and really noticeable. Like it was becoming extremely noticeable. One of my memories, my youngest daughter met her now husband. He thought I was the loveliest woman because by day I'd go in and see him. He was working at KFC, and he said, you used to walk in and you were so put together, you were dressed nicely and your hair was done and makeup on. He came to pick my daughter up one night, and I was very, very drunk. And I walked outside and I was screaming out to him, well, why don't you come in the effing house? What are you effing doing out there? And he said, I couldn't believe you were the same person.
Yeah.
There's so many of those stories, though. There's so many of those, like just and then it's in the morning, you know, you wake up with that guilt, remorse, shame. What have I done? I was always a blackout drinker, always.
Yeah.
So sometimes the way that I gauged what had gone on the night before is I would wake up in the morning cringing, and I'd look at my ex-husband and think, is he angry? Is other children angry? And then, you know, all that shame would come out and that guilt, and then you just have to drink more because you don't want to deal with that.
Yeah, I used to wait for the first SMS in the morning because I would get up early, go to work before anybody was awake, and it was about 8, 9 o'clock. I'd get the first SMS when other people were waking up, and if it was a good morning, I was like, okay, good. Or if there was nothing, I was like, oh no, this is not good. It's not good at all. It sounds like you were a daily drinker. Am I correct?
I was towards the end of my drinking, yeah. I drank every afternoon, yeah.
Every afternoon?
Yeah.
Did you have rules in place, like I don't drink before this time, or I only drink this much, or?
I used to say to myself, well, I won't drink on an empty stomach.
Okay.
I'll make sure I have some food in my stomach. I recall I found out that they sold wine that was a half-strength wine, so I drove an hour to buy that wine.
Okay.
And I bought 3 bottles of it, and I brought it home, and I got even more drunk actually because I drank the whole 3 bottles.
You drank more?
Yes, on the half-strength. But it was, towards the end of my drinking there was nothing. And it was interesting too that I think about sometimes I could come home and I would only have 1 glass of wine and I would be gone. I would be gone.
Mm.
And I would have a blackout and I would sort of wake up and think, where am I? And I'm like, I've only had 1 glass of wine. Like, how did that happen? Oh, you're lightweight, Racheal. You'll have to do better tomorrow. You'll need to do better tomorrow. So I believe, they talk about, I've learnt a lot in AA. I've learnt about the disease of alcoholism, and they talk a lot about Korsakoff's and wet brain.
Yes.
And for me, I was starting to have these episodes where I would be talking to somebody, and this is when I was sober at work, and I would have no idea what I was saying to them. Yeah. In mid-conversation, I would just look at them blankly, and they would say, are you okay? And I'd say, just trying to fumble your way through it. But the fact was I actually I had no idea what we were talking about. That rattled me.
Oh, of course.
It still didn't stop me from drinking though, but I'm just looking at some of the signs for me that my health was really, really deteriorating.
Yeah. Describe what led you to say, I've got to start putting this down. And I guess your journey from thinking everything's okay to going, I need to try and do something about this.
I lost my mum in 2007. I was 38. And then I lost my dad in 2012. So they passed away 5 years apart. They were quite young. She was only 59 when she passed away. My younger brother had been seeing a psychologist who, funnily enough, was through veterans counselling.
Yes.
And I started seeing this person. I had a string of seeing psychologists, and always I would say, that doesn't work for me. Mm-hmm. They're not working for me. And I started seeing this particular person, and I was seeing him for quite a while. And he said to me one day, have you ever heard of AA? And I said, no, what would I need that for? And he left it. He said nothing more about it.
And sowed the seed, yep.
He said nothing more. So that was probably about 4 years before I got into the rooms. I was seeing him for quite some time. We started working together, and I started having these small awakenings of what my life was actually looking like. And the drinking was getting worse. Like my drinking, the episodes that I was having, my hangovers were worse. I was sick. Yeah, there was a lot going on. Mm-hmm. My last drunk, which I've never forgotten my first drunk, I've never forgotten my last drunk. I had a girlfriend and her daughter had passed away. She was only 8. Mm-hmm. That brought back a lot of pain for me around my son. Like it brought a lot of pain around that. And I remember saying to my ex-husband, I was saying to him, we're going to this funeral up in Queensland. Don't make an ass of yourself, please. Don't get drunk. Don't do this. Don't. I berated him for weeks before we went up. I find myself, I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to drink. Mm-hmm. That was my I'm not going to drink. I remember sitting there at this surf club, and I remember this waitress coming around, and there were these wine glasses sitting on a little tray, and there was water beating off the outside of them. And it was 11 o'clock in the day, and I said, Racheal, don't do this. Don't do this. And against my own will, I picked up a drink. All I remember waking up in the morning and I felt awful. I had bruises all over me. My ex-husband was just looking at me, shaking his head. And I was like, I have no idea what I've done. And I said the words, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
And he said, what are you talking about? And I said, I don't know, but I can't live like this anymore. I can't do this, and I can't do it alone. And then I found myself at my first AA meeting about a week later. So I believe for me they talk about calling out to that power.
Yeah.
And understanding my powerlessness, and I just couldn't go on. They talk about sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was not intentional. I wasn't intending to do that. That's what got me into the room.
Yeah. Look, it's different for everybody, and it's at different times. And what I've learned is that there's only one rock bottom, and that's when you're dead, because you can always get lower.
Yeah.
And it's just about when we get to that point where we go, I cannot, as you just said perfectly, I cannot live like this. Yeah. I just can't do this anymore. And I think one of two things happen when you realize that. You go down very quickly and you end it all, or you reach out and you go for help.
Yeah.
Because everything else is a delusion in between. Mm-hmm. What was your first meeting like? I
love telling the story of my first meeting. It was actually in an old fire station.
Okay.
Which it's not there anymore. And I had no idea what I was looking at or what to expect. I walked into this meeting and I remember it was just one of those screen doors, really old screen door that you pulled across. And there were these people sitting in this room in a circle very quietly. They were very quiet, and some of them had their hands together. And I walked in and I sat up the back. And I don't remember what they were sharing about, but I just remember sitting in this quiet and I was like, I have no idea where I am. I don't know if I like it. I left the meeting. I didn't talk to anybody. I left the meeting.
Yes.
And I can't even tell you what made me go back. And then the next week I found some more meetings. I started going to other meetings. I think I had a huge fear because of the employment that I was in. I was running a large team of people in the local area, and I was so frightened of seeing someone.
Yeah.
And my cover being blown.
Yeah, I get it.
Like I was so of being exposed. Right? I was just so, and there was such shame around alcoholism. Like I was so ashamed of being an alcoholic, forgetting myself. You know, I see myself as this intelligent woman, and I find myself like a slave, to this substance. People kept saying to me, just keep coming back. And I'm so glad that they said that to me. Like, and they shook my hand and said, you're so welcome. Like, we're so glad you're here. And I'm like, why would you want me here? Yeah. Like, I'm such a waste of space. That it was that self-esteem. I just had they talk about sometimes it's either really low or it's too high. Like we've got this perception of ourselves that's, how dare you treat me like that? And then there's that other side that's like, oh, I don't belong here. Like the things that I've done, I shouldn't really hold space anywhere. And I did there was a particular meeting I went to. I remember walking into it. People were greeting me outside. They said, oh, hello, are you the guest speaker? And I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. What is a guest speaker?
Yeah.
I walked into that meeting and it was in a church and there were people at the front and there was people sitting in the pews, and they asked me to read something, which I now know is how it works, but I was reading these words and I was like, I was in this time warp. I'm like, I don't even know. Like, I had no idea but again, I really loved that people said, just keep coming back, like just keep coming back.
Yeah, it's simple. It's easy.
Yeah. And I think it was that illusion for me that I looked so put together.
Yeah.
Right? I looked so put together, but I was dying. Really, I was literally mentally, physically, and emotionally, I was dying.
Yeah.
Wilting away. And I'm glad that I kept coming back.
You can still see the secrets, the family secrets when you were a child, the family secrets when you were drinking yourself, and then the secrets that you had from other people going, I need to put on this facade to walk around and look all put together that I might be able to fool people, but on the inside but that's why I think that second A, I always used to say, is very important to me, the anonymous, because it's hard to be honest without the anonymity. I think it's only within the room where you feel safe that you can actually express that. Mm-hmm. And it takes a while to realize that. There's a large part of me, I'm still petrified. If I walked into a room and I saw somebody that I recognized from outside that I didn't know, my sponsor knows that I'll, duck, roll and cover and run out the door. And he knows that if that happens and he sees me doing something weird, like the crab walk behind the couch, try and get out of there, he knows that I've seen someone from my outside life that I don't want to know. And there's still a huge part of me that would be my natural instinct. So it's masks we wear.
Yeah. And it's all that, because if it looks perfect, then maybe it is perfect, and then if I'm acting in that way, then I'm more likable, I'm more presentable to the community.
Yes.
Like it's that if people really knew what was going on in my life, that was one of my biggest fears in AA when I first got in. I came in and I was so paranoid. I was so untrusting. I was fragile. I didn't realize I was so fragile.
Yes.
So when I came in, I was extremely frightened because I thought my biggest fear was that people were going to say, you are so sick. Like, we don't want someone like, we don't want someone like you here. And that they would run away from me. Like, I'd be abandoned, rejected, abandoned, a pattern of my life that, I saw as being rejected and, things like that. And the lovely experience I had was when I finally shared my story. I remember the build up to it. I remember the specific meeting I was at too, and I remember the build up, and I'm like, today's the day. I'm telling my whole story. This is it. I'm going to knock your socks off. I remember this. And I remember telling my story, and people just sat there and they went, It's
very anticlimactic,
and
isn't it?
And that was it.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
we've all done it.
I had this magnificent thing orchestrated, and no one, I'm not saying they didn't care, but what it was of no surprise. Like they were like, oh yeah, we've done those things too.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay.
Yeah. No, I had the exact same experience. It was, I'm going to finally come out and share who I really am, because I wasn't just hiding who I was from the outside with my drinking. I was hiding who I was from the people that I was, within the rooms as well. They couldn't know who I was because I was someone important. I was someone who had responsibilities, and I can't have these two worlds collide. And it wasn't, honestly, it wasn't until recently that I was like, it was like everyone knew who I was. And I was there going, I can't have these two worlds collide. It wasn't until I was able to share it openly. And again, you get that massive anticlimax. No one, like, we don't care who you are. We don't care what you've done. We don't care, we don't care if you're the Prime Minister or the Pope or whatever. If you want to get sober, we are here for you because we know the same crap. We've all done it, and even worse. I love it. I love that everybody shares the same thing. I haven't had anybody share with me in these interviews any judgment within the rooms. I haven't. I've been pissed off with people in the rooms, and that was mainly when I first got there. Overzealous people. Are you an alcoholic? Are you this? I'm like, piss off with you. Who the hell are you? I'm just here. I don't know what you are. You might be an alcoholic. I'm fine. But I've never had any judgment.
Yeah, I have never experienced, and I think that's what keeps me coming back.
Yeah, because
if I had felt there was so much, I felt so much growing up. I've also learnt that this is not, like, this disease lies within me.
Yes.
It lies within me. However, I did have an upbringing that was quite dysfunctional. And also with that carried some trauma around that. AA is probably the only place that I felt understood.
Yes.
And heard and seen.
Yes.
They're the words for me that I look at. And people, even when I have told my story, have said, keep coming back. See you next week.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh.
You don't hate me?
I'm actually allowed to be here. I'm allowed to actually be here.
Yeah. Like there's no need for imposter syndrome within the rooms.
No.
We all need to be there and we all recognise that. Mm-hmm. What does your life look like now? Like a synopsis. We've heard a lot about the, I guess, before. What about the after?
Wow. They talk about we get a life that we just couldn't imagine.
Yeah.
And we talk a lot about in the promises, that we intuitively know how to handle things that used to baffle us, and we'll lose financial fear, and all of they've actually come true for me. And it's taken time. It's taken time. I forget sometimes that I want to be 30 years sober now, and I had this delusion that that you get sober and bad things don't happen. No. The reality is life has happened to me over my sobriety, but I've been given these tools to actually deal with life now. Like I've got a toolbox. And I have people in my corner that I didn't have before.
Yes.
And, I've been through a really painful divorce and I had to live by myself for the first time in my life. I was living as a 46-year-old woman in an apartment by myself without a baseball bat under my bed. My anxiety used to be crippling. So, and here I am sleeping with my door open, my balcony door open.
Yeah.
So the fear has subsided.
Yes.
The compulsion to drink for me was gone fairly quickly.
Yes.
That was removed.
That's good.
I'm so grateful for that. I'm very, very grateful. And I believe my first sponsor led me to this God of my understanding, because that was also murky and cloudy around what that looked like for me. I'd had so much loss that I always saw God as this punishing whatever it was. Yeah. And I've learned through my sobriety, I got led to this beautiful God that is loving, kind, and gentle. Mm-hmm. And I learned how to pray to that God. I've learned acceptance. I've learned about meditation. So for me, these are all things that align really well with me because of my anxieties and my fears that come up, being an alcoholic. These have been the greatest gifts for me. So my life today is, I live with my partner. I've been with my partner for 6 years. I've met this person that I don't think I'd ever really been honest with anyone. I've never been able to, even in a relationship, to actually speak about what was really going on. And again, for fear of being rejected, abandoned, run away from, I have this really lovely, we have the quietest household. We have a really quiet household. We play board games together. Once upon a time, I would have thought, you're boring as.
They're more fun than what you think.
Oh, we have so much fun. And it's just, we listen to music and we dance together and we go camping and we babysit our grandchildren. And we've got a blended family. We have our children here. We have these relationships. That's been the best thing for me. I have these relationships with family members, work colleagues, friends, AA people. I couldn't maintain relationships.
Yeah.
That was so off my radar. For me, it was oh, you've done this, see you later. And really easy to do that, really easy to eliminate people from my life. Today, I don't want to eliminate people.
No.
Today I actually want to, and I want to work through things. I've got a really, really beautiful sponsor. And again, for the first time in my life, I've got a female, because I did have a lot of issues with females before coming into the rooms. I have this really safe and loving relationship with this person that I trust. We've been working together for 8 years.
Yeah.
And I trust her immensely. She tells me nothing's off the table, Racheal. What we talk about is safe.
Yeah.
It's in the vault. And I give that. My first sponsor said to me, you can't keep this gift if you don't give it away.
Yeah.
And so I've been working with other women since I was really 6 months sober, and I haven't stopped, and I hope I never do. And I hope that I can give them that same gift that I'm given, that opportunity to be seen and heard and not judged.
Yes.
So, yeah, the awakening, that's what it is. I call it the awakening, the spiritual awakening.
That's beautiful. People who can hear us, Racheal's house is a very peaceful place. It's in a lovely area, and it's so peaceful and calm. The dog might bark loud and scare us half to death halfway through, but that's okay. But what I loved hearing about that part of your story is that you've been able to find emotional and spiritual health, realize that you can maintain that even in the midst of chaos and even in the midst of trouble and life. Because what I've realized with the Serenity Prayer is that the only thing I can control is me. I can't control what happens to me, how other people react to me. I can't control my wife. I can't control my children. I can only control me. And that, I guess you got that old saying, which is, life is not what happens to you, it's how you react to it. And it looks like you're living that out perfectly, living your best life. And winning looks different to everybody. What you've described isn't that what you live for? Being able to spend time with your grandchildren, enjoying the fruits of your labor, having a peaceful life, happy, content with people, and having lots of friends. It's worth more than $1 million.
Very much so. And I think, and also that I don't have the desire to drink on that. Things happen to me. Life happens. And my first thought is not, oh, I need a drink.
No.
My first thought is, okay, do I need to breathe? Do I need to go for a walk? Do I need to pray? Do I need to call my sponsor? What step can I use? Like, what am I looking at? Do I need to do some inventory? What can I do right now? But it's never about picking up a drink.
Yeah.
And I pray every day that compulsion
doesn't return
for me. And I really, really believe if I stick around, if I stick with the strength, they talk about sticking with the strength in AA, going to meetings, simple, go to meetings. Do the steps, work with a sponsor, do some service work, have a God in your life. It sounds like a lot, but it's actually it's simple, but I complicate.
We look at the lengths that we used to go to get drunk and the effort and the energy and the mapping it out on your calendar and I guess the hiding it and the lying and the stress. This is an easy, substitution. Which one would I rather? Which burden would, a burden is a better example. Which burden would I prefer to carry? And I know which one I'll choose. What advice would you have to somebody who is struggling with not being able to put it down or doesn't know what to do?
I have quite a few people in my life that's happening to right now. And I don't know if I have any advice, Michael. What I can do for people is just to be there and listen.
Yeah.
I can be there and listen, and I can share my story to let them know that there's hope. Like, there's hope that you can come and you can have a life without drinking. Like, it's actually possible, and it's possible to have a really good life.
Yeah.
A good, peaceful life without drinking. So I think that's my take on it. I just listen, hear what they have to say.
That's amazing. Look, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. Why don't you lead us out with the Serenity Prayer?
Oh, thank you. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Thank you. You're a delight.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today on Beyond Sobriety. Just before we wrap up, I'd like to leave you with a gentle reminder. If you happen to recognize anyone who shared their story on this podcast, I urge you to respect their anonymity and privacy. Let's create a safe space where individuals can feel empowered to share their experience without fear of judgment or disclosure. And if you found today's episode helpful or inspiring, I encourage you to share Beyond Sobriety with somebody who might benefit from it. Together, we can spread awareness, support, and hope to those still struggling with alcohol addiction. Remember, your feedback is invaluable to us. If you have any thoughts, suggestions, or stories you'd like to share, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at beyondsobrietyaa@gmail.com. Thank you once again for tuning in. Until next time, stay strong, stay sober, and remember, you're not alone in this journey. I'm Michael, and I'm an alcoholic.